Welcome to the observation deck. Observation log number 1. Begin. Pacific Rim 1, giant mechs and piloting giant mechs. So Pacific Rim 1, the only one, shows us that there's an interesting way in which these giant robots in universe are piloted. These giant robots called Jaegers employ a method of control called drifting. Now, before I go too deep into drifting, I want to look into the different methods employed in controlling giant robots that we see throughout anime, because anime is definitely an animation genre where we see a lot of mech related shows which come in different shapes and sizes and employ different ways in which these giant robots can be controlled. So within the scope of anime, we do see that different robots, mechs, can be controlled through psychic means, through magic, through crystals, through purely manual mechanical means, through whatever this is, as well as through mutilating your body in order to control and meld with this crazy machine of war. Something very interesting about the means of piloting giant robots is that in these universes in anime, these robots are piloted in weird and wacky ways because some of these robots demand these methods of control. Now, for instance, the Avas in Neon Genesis Evangelion, these guys are piloted through a neural interface, which really messes with the pilot's head, right? So if you've watched that anime, you know what I mean. So moving on, then we also find methods such as crystals in Vision of Escaflowne, or other methods such as I mentioned before, bodily harm and mutilation in order to sync with your machine of war. So these giant robots, whether it's a Jaeger, a Frank, a Gundam, a Gaimelef, an LFO, or a gunman, has to operate within the power at work within the world, in universe, right? So if in universe the power system is a giant crystal, the power system is some weird nerve interface thing that messes with your mind, or it's some weird partnership thing that has to happen to gain oneness, it all has to work within the parameters of world building, within the actual system that we see in the show or movie. Now that takes me back to Pacific Rim 1, drifting. Now, drifting is an interesting method because in order to control these colossal robots, these Jaegers, you need two pilots. One and the other, they have to be in sync in order to control this giant body of metal. So they have to have a high level of compatibility in order to control this robot. One guy has to be the left side of the brain, the other has to be the right side of the brain. And even though, yes, it is possible to control these Jaegers independently, it's just not a favorable situation to be in because they are definitely meant to be piloted by two people at once. Both of you melding into one conscious in order to control these giant heavy robots. A very fascinating thing about drifting is within Pacific Rim 1 is that this method isn't simply employed by the Jaeger pilots alone, but also by the kaiju. We see towards the middle and end of the movie that the kaiju aren't independent, but they are controlled by some beings in the antiverse, or Hollow Earth as I prefer to understand it. I also think that it definitely makes sense that you would need two brains in order to control such a colossal body of metal. So even though drifting allows these giant Jaegers to be piloted, the robots themselves, though mechanical marvels, are pretty slow, heavy, and usually don't keep up very well when in combat situations with the kaiju. The kaiju always seem to be adapting and employing new methods to take out the Jaegers, and the Jaegers always seem to be left behind, reactionary, slow. But I really hope that there will be more mech-related films outside of anime, more mech-related show, whether live action or what, because it'd be great to see different means of piloting it, different forms and shapes of mechs and storytelling, live action, cartoons, just new creative ways of expressing this genre. Now here's an obvious observation. In order to build and control something enormous, you need to unite and become one. Like, subscribe, Observation log number 1 complete.